This conversation is sponsored by Tri-Wall Circular.
Hello, everybody. My name's Louis Yakumi from LConnect, and we're having a short webinar on the importance of packaging to the automotive industry. It's based around a survey which I did a couple of months ago, where I spoke to or communicated with some of the leading executives, supply chain and logistics executives, as well as packaging executives in the global automotive industry, and had responses from around the world telling us what they felt are the most important issues. So we thought it would be good to also follow it up with a discussion to talk about those topics and anything else that springs to mind. If you haven't received the survey and do want to receive it, then let me know either by email or through my links on LinkedIn. But otherwise, I hope anyway that this conversation will be enable us to understand a little bit more about what was discussed in the survey, and also what's important in the automotive packaging and container management sector. So been very lucky to have a great panel here. So I'd like them to introduce themselves briefly, and we'll start with the Volvo team, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is J.K. McKenzie, and I'm the head of Global Packaging Engineering here at Volvo Cars, located in Gothenburg, Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thanks, Louis. I'm Sean Bricknell, and I'm responsible for the Performance Office for Supply Chain, which incorporates strategy, quality, sustainability, and new vehicle programs.
Okay. John?
Hi, Louis. I'm the Inbound Logistics Warehouse and Packaging Manager, and I'm based at Nissan Sunderland plant. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you, John. Adam?
Hello, my name is Adam Misiak, and I'm currently with Yazaki as head of the EMEA logistics, including packaging, transportations, customs, and 3PL, so distribution warehousing.
Thank you. Rodney?
Yeah, hi, Rodney Salmon RTP Limited. I'm an independent consultant on packaging, mainly returnable packaging. Currently working with Tri-Wall and bringing in returnables into their packaging range.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So as we said, I organised the packaging. It was our third packaging survey a couple of years ago. I do it every 18 months or so. The third one was completed in late 2025 and was indeed sponsored by Tri-Wall. So thank you very much for that, Tri-Wall. So the first kind of issue is, is packaging important? Is packaging strategic? It starts off from a kind of years of talking about packaging, but even last year, just before the packaging survey, one of the responses I got was that packaging is still one of the most least respected, least invested in sectors of the automotive logistics or automotive supply chain. Is that still the case? Is packaging now considered to be strategic?
From my perspective, historically, packaging has been an afterthought. Only when the problem occurs do you get the call, right? And say, hey, it's packaging's fault, whether that be a quality issue with a part or a supplier issue, what have you. I would say now, especially as we move into more electric vehicles, cost, of course, has been at the forefront of every OEM. And therefore, I think it's quickly becoming not an afterthought, but something that we proactively are looking at earlier and earlier in our car projects. I mean, I think it's within my organization here, I think that packaging has now been considered a driver or an enabler for efficient logistics now. And I think it's being viewed like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, I can comment as well. I think with the 30 years being in the supply chain, packaging was always, I would say, not ignored, but was underestimated. And as it was just mentioned, from the quality perspective, it was important. From the cost perspective, I would say it was slightly, forgotten. Because if I compare, the the packaging cost, so it's kind of an iceberg. So you can see only what you spent buying certain packaging or having this included in the piece price of your raw material. But below you have all the other costs, which is, I don't know, warehouse efficiency, quality issues, utilizations of your equipment, utilizations of the trucks, containers, the I mean, all the items that you can lease. So on the top, you can just see the price for your lease cost or returnable cost, the one-way packaging, and this is really very, very small part of the cost. And I would estimate it that if the cost above the level is 1, so the cost below it's probably 5, 6. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
and I want to just say that, well, over the last, I would say, years or many years, I've been fighting also, to take the packaging seriously. And with different organizations that I have been working with, it was taken, but again, people were tending to forget about this one as a limited number of the resources, availability. But right now at Yazaki, I think we are taking this very seriously. We have the dedicated team, at least central team, besides the engineers that are working on the design of the packaging or on the packing, I would say, design, because we are not designing the packaging. We are designing the way that we want to pack the stuff, and then we let the specialists to do the design of the boxes themselves. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on what some of the guys have said, I think with an organization, packaging is taken extremely seriously. So in terms of specifically design, the quality for the part, I think we touched about new model there. The timeline you start designing a pack is probably 2 to 3 years ahead of when we start production. So we start the process very early in there. So I think in that terms, it's taken extremely seriously. I think one of the things you might know, so when you walk about the shop floor, etc., is often people might just use packaging and not even realize the impact it could have. So if you've got returnable loops, and you might see a contractor walking around carrying some of their tools in a box, or somebody pushing a stillage with some storage parts in, I don't think they sometimes understand the bigger impact it can have on that packaging loop and how critical it is to the business. And as I think the guys from Volvo said there, it's when then somebody comes knocking on the door because we're short or there's an issue with quality, that's when people realize, I think. But yeah, in terms of the upfront work and the visibility, I think packaging definitely certainly gets that now.
Yeah. And Rodney, despite looking so young, you've been in the industry for quite a few years. Usually on the other kind of from the packaging side, have you seen a difference in the importance of logistics when you speak to your customers?
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you get you're speaking to somebody and you get introduced and say, "What do you do for a living?" You go packaging. You sort of get a funny look, okay? But then you point out there's actually you ask them to look around the room or look around where they are, okay? And you say to them, "There's only one thing in that room that's not been packaged, and that's actually the air that you breathe." And even that comes in packaging now. So there you go. But I think the most important thing is how packaging is evolved over the last of these years. And now we're in a situation where we've got a different type of packaging in the automotive industry coming in, with lighter parts coming in, lighter packaging. Packaging needs to last the full service of the vehicle. And also, when we look at the total circular economy, which has changed from producing packaging and then that's it, that's my job out the way, to actually, understanding that packaging is in your system for life, or should be, because it should be returnable, it should be reused, it should be recycled, etc., etc. And now we're seeing the lights of packaging for the first time being actually proved through ISO standards as being a sort of part of the ESG savings. This is getting serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I take that point. I was one of those who disrespected packaging when I first started automotive logistics. And with all due respect to John and JK, I remember General Motors saying to me that I should increase the coverage of packaging in the magazine, and that was 25 years ago. And they said you need to speak to our packaging engineer, Bruce Nelson. And And I said, packaging engineer, how can you be an engineer of packaging? They're square boxes, maybe they're rectangular or something like that. But how do you engineer that? Well, over the 25 years, and almost immediately when I first spoke to Bruce in those days, I realized how important packaging was for so many reasons. And hopefully we'll go into those a little bit today. But what about the ownership and accountability? Again, I think a few years ago when I was in Detroit and having a meeting of a few different suppliers there, and we were in one of the meeting rooms, and they were saying they had a what do you call it, a spider kind of phone, a conference phone in the middle of the table, and they said that that probably cost the same as one of their boxes, and if one of the conference spider phones got lost or something like that, everyone would be asking what the hell's going on. But with packaging, it just at that stage, and it was maybe 15 years ago, it just was kind of accepted that packaging got lost. So who kind of is responsible for the packaging now? And it's we've got a supply of a major global parts supplier on the phone, some car makers. So who takes ownership? Who owns the problem? Who takes accountability? Is there now strict accountability for packaging the boxes themselves?
From my perspective, or from Volvo's perspective, it's honestly depending on the supply chain model on how we manage the packaging. For returnables, typically that is done through an investment led by the company. And then if it is some sort of intercontinental flow or flow outside of the EU or a long distance flow, then that might be in a one-way box that is paid for through a piece price with an agreement with that tier one supplier. Now, so that's how we kind of procure our packaging. As far as attrition, I call it, or loss of packaging, I would say that is still at the forefront of a problem within all OEMs. Where's the packaging, ensuring that that it doesn't get lost, that we within our own company or four walls manage it the way it's supposed to be managed, meaning handling it with the right respect in order to prevent damage, right? Making sure that we're storing it and have 5S solutions within our four walls to make sure that, hey, one forklift driver isn't putting it in one corner and another forklift driver in another corner, right? But also holding our tier ones accountable and ensuring that they're handling it properly. But to combat the attrition or loss, I think that there are several technologies that have come available within the last 15 years, whether that be RFID, GPS, et cetera. But with those, each comes its own pros and cons. So it is still, I would say, a leading problem, but I think it's something that as technology evolves, it will also involve from a track and trace perspective.
I want to just add a little bit of that because I think this question, it's an age-old question, Louis, and it's age-old because it is so complex and there are so many different models. I remember when I was at General Motors, and it's actually similar here in Volvo Cars. Depending on the region, we actually have different models. So in one region, we might own the returnable packaging. In another region, we might rent it or lease it. If it's a specific type-bound packaging, there's models where in some cases it can be owned by the tier one supplier. In many cases, it's owned by the OEM. But it is that's the one aspect. And then the other aspect is that there are multiple parties even within our own company that touch this and that have the ability to lose it. And so it's really a very fascinating question.
Yeah. Maybe I'll go to Adam now, because as an important global tier supplier, the car makers have kind of got responsibility to make it simple, responsible for it coming back to them and leaving them. Because you must be getting packaging in from various different tier twos and then going from there to various customers. So how do you manage the ownership or responsibility of the packaging as a supplier?
Yeah, I would say that there are for me two different type of responsibilities. Responsibilities, who owns the packaging, within the company, and we are not only talking about the outbound but also inbound, as you mentioned, from the suppliers. But we also talk about the internal packaging, what we are moving within the four-wall plants, which is another aspect. I mean, so today that responsibility of the ownership is spread around in different departments: logistics, operations, manufacturing, purchasing, etc., etc. I think ideally, and this is my at least goal right now, is to have it under the one kind of a central team that would manage all of those I would say boxes, whatever, spools, etc. From the perspective of the ownership, the design, I mean the way that we should be packing, the way we should handle them, the way we should be moved, the size and the standard pack size and all this stuff. And also whether it should be returnable or not returnable, because I think we are not focusing maybe only on the returnable packaging. We use a lot of, especially our tier 2 suppliers. The majority of them, they use the carton boxes, so it's one-way packaging. And then the responsibility, I would say, within, then whether what was mentioned, whether we are potentially losing them or if it's rental box, do we control what we really rent and what we have in the plants, what we have in the transit. I think we have a lot of companies like CHEP, Jeffbox, and now, iFast, whatever. They controlling, they telling you, what it is, but it depends all about all the connections between the, I would say, the suppliers, the OEM, and how they are managed through the system. Because at one side, we know that we are not losing the boxes, or why we should lose them. But on the other side, we see the system and showing us, we're missing 10,000 pieces and where they are. And it's just, I would say the discipline of the people to manage the system, because we don't do the counting every month. We do this maybe once per year or once per 2 years. And then we discover, okay, we have all those boxes, okay, with some exceptions, small deviations, 1-2%, which is acceptable, but not, thousands. So I think from my perspective, the ownership should be within kind of a group that is really focusing on packaging, whether it's operations, whether it's purchasing, and it should be somehow connected, because it is a very important subject and is for years underestimated. And even the people they're trying to focus, as it was mentioned by Volvo team, in different regions, you have different strategies. So, and even within the same company, within the same regions, I can say that the plants, they have different strategies. I think ideally would be to have the packaging, at least from the tier 2 suppliers, that we can directly present to the line without necessity of the repack. And that is our goal with our what we call Kototsukuri hubs when we are doing this type of activities. But we are not at the end of the, I would say, road yet, and there is, the big development required, to get it on track and get it, I would say, managed properly with what it should come with the savings improvements and on both quality and efficiency and the cost. Yeah.
But that's a good point, real quick, there on the manufacturing side of things, and as packaging centrally here, manufacturing is considered a cross-functional stakeholder of sorts. So how do you manage? The key question here is, how do you manage an efficient transport in your inbound, but also an efficient packaging line side? Because as I see it, as you grow in distance from your manufacturing plants, you should also grow in density inside your boxes in order to support that. But then what happens when the parts arrive to the manufacturing plant? Does that mean that now you need to repack? Or should you try to carry that box to the plant or to the facade? That's I think a key question. And so you bring that up. And so that's a fine balance, I would say. To your point there when discussing these things.
And this is what I mentioned at the beginning about this iceberg. So all what you just mentioned, this efficiency of moving the parts, density of the boxes, density of the equipment, trucks, etc. Because you can move the full truck, which is really up to the roof, But if you open the box and you have half empty, then it's still, not good enough. And this is, what is this behind, this hidden cost, I would say, and this efficiency, yeah.
But I think things like that specifically, again, when you're considering your pack types, and one of the key things we look at is how does that then fit in a container for shipping from, I don't know, from Japan across here. What does the stack up look like? Are we better dropping one layer on one pallet so we can get 3 pallets high in a container and fill the maximum cube? These are all decisions that we look at when we're designing packaging, when we're about to ship the packaging through. And then to the point that was just made, I think, by JK about then how does it make it through to the final part of the line, the production? Because ideally, we don't want to touch it again. We design it, we get maximum fill, and it makes it all the way through to the end customer, so right through our production line. And that's the way we try and design from the start, with minimum packaging. Obviously, I think we touched on there, the loops are getting longer, depending on where we're sourcing from. So you've got to get that balance between quality, between making sure things don't rust, between scratches, etc., but with minimum impact to the production line. And that's all part of this key work. And I think we said it earlier, the timeline that this starts on new initiatives is really early in the process to make sure we get that buy-off and we do a test line side. And there's lots of effort goes into this. But I think just to touch on what you were just saying there about the ownership, it's quite interesting because it sounds very similar again. So I think if I think of our side, it's where possible, we'll always look to set up a returnable loop. It's what we'll try and do. And if that's the case, we would purchase as the company and we would own them. If it's not suitable, so if that part for whatever reason won't fit in a standard pack, if it's got a unique requirement, it could be shape, it could be the specific finish of it, we would ask the supplier to purchase that pack, and then it would be picked up in the piece price, so a bit like what JK said before. And then your kind of final option, if we can't get a returnable pack, whether it be unique or through that we own, we would then start going down the single-use pack, and we'll start seeing about disposable packaging. Again, that would be picked up piece price, so similar, I guess, to what JK was saying before. But very much, I think, the worst thing we could do is double-handle packaging. We don't want to be doing a decant. We don't want to be trying to do anything like that, adding cost into it. So we'll try and design it right at the start is the ideal.
But designing early, I mean, that's important for the kind of efficiency of packaging for so many reasons. But are you involved, how involved are you in the sort of parts design, or how strong is your voice when you're saying, actually, if we change the design of this part just a little bit, we can therefore fit it into, more efficiently into containers, which, brings savings further up. Do you have any voice in that? How do you manage the kind of the logistics side versus the line side, which we kind of just discussed, and the cost side? How valuable is the packaging voice in all of these things?
Well, I can speak from a Volvo Cars side. We've put a huge amount of effort into this. So we are working really closely with engineering and design. In fact, we've even developed a training program called Design for Logistics, and it's really to look at, are there specific, it's not for everything, but there are specific parts, there are specific commodities where if they were designed or if they're at a different level of assembly, you can significantly impact the density that you get inside the box. And I think this is becoming there's a much bigger awareness of this. And like you say, Louis, it needs to happen right up front. I mean, it's so far early. In fact, it's before the car program that we're doing this work. I think as an industry, an automotive industry, we're becoming far more smarter about this. There's a much deeper understanding of how this can impact. One of our most recent car launches, packaging was one of the biggest contributors to bringing that cost down to beating the budget in terms of what we want to do. And it really, we were fortunate enough to use it as an example, because I think we have a responsibility within our own organizations to educate the organization on what we have. It's such a big opportunity that we have, that if we can do this right. So we really are seeing some positive progress there.
And it's all about getting that advertisement out of packaging, right? And what it can do. And a success story based off of on a specific example was a tab on this part. It was sticking outwards 90 degrees. And basically we've looked at the part and in the early phases with the R&D and got it positioned in a different way where it nested with the part behind it, which increased the utilization by 50%. And as you can imagine, that just reduces the number of boxes that you need as well as the number of transport. So, I mean, the advertisement and the education, to your point, Sean, and some of the teams that you're helping support with on this education and designing for logistics is really paying off. So we're seeing it now so more than ever.
Good.
Yeah. I echo that opinion as well. I think we work hand in glove now with the cost departments, etc. And if we can make that change, I think nesting's a perfect word. That's what we normally find as well. So, you know, somebody designing something with a fixed stud, for instance, it might point out and you might not realize, but actually if we take one of those out and we bring it in, we can hugely increase it. So we definitely have a voice now on things like this when involved early.
I think that's the important part of the OEM taking responsibility for the packaging rather than the tier supplier taking responsibility for the packaging, because the OEM knows straight from the word go what cars are being designed, what parts are being designed. Okay. And then once that part is designed and finished, then it goes to the tier supplier for costing. As far as I can see, that's that's the importance of it. And we're seeing a different aspect and a different attention when the OEM says, okay, well, the tier suppliers are going to buy all the packaging. Yeah, we see a different kind of, as a supplier, I see a different view. And when I see that an MH and PE team, materials handling and packaging engineering team at the OEM, you seem to be getting a lot more care about what's going on, and you're notified a lot more in advance. And I think that's just the way the supply chain works at the moment. Whereas, it's not a downer on any of the tier suppliers because they tend to be last minute, where the OEMs are much more advanced, 2 years in advance of ordering, packaging.
Well, we're the ones
Yeah.
paying for the transport, so I mean, it's we have to do it, right? I mean, but what I've realized over the years too is that, sometimes we shouldn't just think about Volvo or Nissan or whoever in a silo. I've actually gotten some inspiration from, reaching out to a tier supplier for a specific part like Adams and taking design ideas from them because they're seeing that one exact part each and every day, whether that be a bumper or whatever, and they're able to give us and support with design ideas. So I would say that more so than ever, we need to be cross-functional in our designs with our tier suppliers, because that's how you create efficiency. That's how you generate ideas. That's how you get what I call the best box from the end to end, from tier to point of use.
Yeah, the design of the components, I think, from my perspective, logistics or purchasing is not very much, involved. It's a purely engineering job because it is more, the working with OEMs. However, our input is, and challenge to both customers and our quality, how we can pack that stuff inside, because it was mentioned by Volvo team that in the majority of the cases they are responsible for the transport, so they care. But in our case, I think with the wire harnesses, we deliver almost to the final destination, so at least to the sequencing center close by. So we also care about that design, and we trying to make it most efficient as possible.
Yeah.
So the layout of the components sometimes, and even if we speak with our suppliers and we challenge them also, how they pack the stuff and how they put, the small pieces, whether it's a bulk or if it's not bulk with the special layers, can we do the little bit, of the puzzles, differently, and that's the workshops that we trying to do and working on the improvements.
Okay, and then we've talked a lot about cost for obvious reasons, and that's not going to disappear. In fact, it seems to be getting worse, the impact or the necessity to reduce costs. But what about sustainability? Is that important? Is it being led by regulations? Is it something that you consider important in-house? And can packaging have an impact on that, or is it a cost added on to the packaging?
I can say because under my responsibility, we have also the sustainability as the scope free, so all the supply chain, movements of the parts, and it is, the big contributors as well. It's from my perspective, I mean, from my personal opinion, it's still very, very, I would say, vague. What is better, returnable packaging or whether it's one-way packaging, because it's very difficult to calculate what it really costs us, to produce these plastic boxes or metal structures versus the carton box. And whether, the returning and the CO2 additional, emissions that we have to bring it back to the plant has to contribute, to all these calculations. But what is important, I think, the packaging is really, how we can reduce, how we can standardize it, first of all, and to use it common. So for the different products, for the different customers, and for the different, I mean, from the different suppliers, and how we can really utilize, our boxes, our containers, our trucks, our, ocean containers as well, better to reduce the number of those, and can we collaborate with some kind of a, if we're talking about the returnable stuff, with additional, OEMs, I mean, well, tier one providers or OEMs, with the returning them back, because we always have the issue that we don't return one to one, because that would be definitely waste of the cost, but waste of the space as well, and not very good for the sustainability. So we try to stack them and to nestle them and whatever, different technologies to be used. And at the end, it's 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, depending on the boxes. So if we want to have the less packaging into the circulation, so produce less of them, at least returnable ones, then we need to find the collaborations between the different parties, how we can do this, and this is what we are trying to do. I mean, can we combine it with our inbound material in this area, and well, all this type of the things. I think at the end, packaging is a big contributor to the sustainability, because not producing them, but when we look on the scope free with the transport and CO2 emissions of the trucks, yes.
And I think now, so more than ever, CO2 is one of the top KPIs that we look at on a monthly basis. I know here we do at Volvo Cars, and how do you match, something that we talk about with CO2 is how do we ensure that the weight of the packaging and the weight of the part are somehow in line with one another, meaning that a 1 kilogram part shouldn't go in a steel rack that weighs 2,000 kilograms or what have you, so trying to match the weight of the part and the weight of the packaging to ensure that, of course, from a CO2 perspective, we're not shipping overly engineered or overly heavy packaging, as well as dense packaging, of course, and making sure our boxes are filled. So those are some of the things that we're really looking into within Volvo is how do we match that to ensure that we're just not using steel containers and heavy parts, heavy racks for lightweight parts when applicable, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
this
that's
is
a good
where.
point. Oh, sorry,
Sorry,
Rodney, please.
no, John, carry on.
No, please, right, go on.
So this is where Gleck comes in, okay, and I'm absolutely been amazed at how the logistics providers, okay, who Gleck is the Global Logistics Emissions Council, and they're now ISO standard on their findings, which means as our ISO standard, that means actually OEMs, tier suppliers, people buying packaging can put their cost savings actually as part of their ESG. And it always amazes me the amount of the people that actually aren't aware of Gleck at the moment, um, and the cost savings it can give, not just on taking out 4,000 kilos out of a weight of a truck, and the fuel it can save over the 5 years of a vehicle, but also understanding, okay, working on that, you can actually work from that and go back, and you've got proven emission savings. Okay, with the reduction in energy, reductions in emissions and gases used, and all that can be worked out in an equation that actually proves by going lightweighting 4,000 kilos out of a truck or whatever, that's what you can save. Recently we did a study. I'm a member of GLEC. I say a member of GLEC. I've been on their courses, and I can actually do the cost savings myself now as a consultant. But these cost savings can be done by any OEM or tier supplier. I think it's €1,500 to go on the course, okay, and then you can learn how to do the cost savings yourself. But these cost savings are, I mean, it's 1.36 million over one part over 5 years was one saving by an OEM we did, yeah, by lightweighting the packaging. It's incredible savings. And then you look at the other cost savings as well, is that, you know, one of the frustrations is, and I may be a bit controversial here, but I don't apologize for it, is the fact that I've been dealing with OEMs and tier suppliers and logistics providers and people like CHEP, yeah, etc., for many, many years. And what we don't see is two things. First of all, buying packaging, okay, that lasts the vehicle life. Yeah. You don't need to change. You shouldn't need to change anything halfway through the vehicle. Okay. If you've got the quality packaging, it'll last a vehicle life. And then afterwards, what happens to it? Okay. 80% of it, 85% of it, unless you're dealing with somebody like CHEP, who obviously is a pooling company, it's their packaging, so they're going to look after it. It goes at the back of a plant, or it goes at the back of a plant where it's tier supplier or OEM, and it sits there. And that's the frustrating bit, because packaging should go back to the packaging supplier at the end of the life of the vehicle, and they should repair it, they should recycle it, and they should make the new packaging out of those materials, saving huge amount of costs. You don't need to replace everything. Packaging should last 20 years.
But should it though? Because that's something that, we get constantly challenged on: lightweight versus durability versus cost, right? So should it last? Because then you have so much money tied up. So there's that balance, right, of cost versus durability, and ensuring you have that correct balance. Yes, you want it to last the full life cycle, but typically you have, in a life cycle of a vehicle, you have the peak, right? That's within the first few years, maybe the first three,
Yeah.
and then you start to decrease. So to me, your packaging should kind of have that same sort of trend as the market of the car, which is typically, like I said, if the car lasts 7 years, your first 3 years are your peak, and then it starts to decrease after that as you prepare for that next model. But to your point, yeah, that's something that we're struggling with, or not struggling with, but something that we're talking about, where lightweight versus durability. And then to your point about reuse and rework, that's something that we try first of all as number one priority before investment, is the rework and reuse, and something that I see as a need in the automotive community, and especially our packaging suppliers, is the ability to make especially our steel racks modular in a way. Instead of weld on, weld off solutions, how do you do bolt on, bolt off solutions that make the rework and reuse a value add to the company, and ultimately leading to sustainability targets? So, yeah.
I think to Rodney's point, I think there's some examples. I can go out and on the shop floor now, and we'll have packs that are 20 years plus. I think I touched on at the start on some of the returnable packs, where we have a standard pack type which we ship across multiple suppliers, so it can go around the world multiple times. We will have examples like that where they're old. I think where it becomes more difficult is when you get your bespoke ones, which I was talking about before, so a unique design pack. But to what JK has just said there again, I think point one was, if we've had one of those, is we'll always go straight back to the supplier when they're making a new one, is, can we slightly modify this? Will the new version of it fit into that unique stillage? So I definitely think that just because of the cost of packaging, because of the impact it can have in general, these aren't decisions that are taken easily just to get rid of packaging. I think there's always a big investment, big challenge on what we can do. I think if we touch back on what you were just talking about, the CO2, I think that's front and foremost for everyone now. It's so visible. It's everybody's KPIs are around this, and I think everybody's challenging to make sure we're having the minimal impact we can. I think, again, if you look at probably the pack types Ronnie touched on before, if I look at what's on the shop floor now with some of the lighter weight plastic packaging boxes versus what you might have seen 6-7 years ago, I think some of the big steel cages have gone where parts suit that. So like what JK was saying, if it's a lighter part, you might see it in a different type of pack. And that's definitely been a switch over the last few years, I'd say, where you're starting to see that change and you're starting to see that through. I think the other key one is, even if I look at, obviously, you'll always try and remove as much dunnage as you can, but that's where your quality, you have to be very careful on how much you can remove from there. So the next thing is, what's the type of dunnage? I think that's a key one that's changed, as well as if I look at what's then recycled to the end point, probably some of the dunnage that's inside a pack now might not have been there 10 years ago. And there's different types where we'll always, if we have to have these throwaway products, it's how do we make sure that they can be recycled and they can be taken away in a safe manner. And that just won't be this. That'll be all the suppliers and manufacturers, I guess. But there's definitely a big switch around the types of materials we use. It's not just the cheapest. It's how can we then recycle, etc., all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I wanted to add one point. I think that yes, the obsolete packaging, which is the obvious, waste, and different companies they handle them differently. And it is true that the manufacturer should take them back and try to do something with them, recycle and produce something new. But also where we come here is, if we would have the standard packaging, I mean, as much as possible standardizations, at least, for the certain industries, I mean, the categories of the commodities, then not buying new ones would be much easier, because we could replace them with those that are ending up, the project, on this year, and then we can use them for the other, projects that is coming. Okay, they would be not brand new, so maybe a little bit used, but still, if they meet, the requirements, if quality is good, everything, works, then it's another way, to recycle them, I would say, in the way that, yeah. And I think one idea for that, and this is what also has been implemented within the company by us here, is to have kind of a database of the obsolete packaging, because the different plants, different manufacturing sites, they don't communicate what they might have, as an obsolete. So in certain cases, we are just looking whether we can use those boxes in some other projects, in some other, I would say, even, moving them to the tier 2 suppliers and using them over there, etc., etc. So,
a good point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I think we've had a very good discussion here. Time is unfortunately a little bit limited, but I think, perhaps we established that, take packaging and container management very seriously. It is important, or make sure that you consider it to be important. Make sure that you consider it to be strategic, because it can have a huge impact on the quality of your parts. It can have a huge impact on cost, not as a cost, but it can have a huge impact on cost reduction if you take it seriously and as part of your strategy. And just as importantly now, it can have a huge impact on the sustainability and on your ESG program. So I think we've established, back to the original point about packaging and container management is hugely important and treat it as such. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your contribution.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean and
Thank you.
JK.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Rodney. And a special thank you again to Tribal Circular for sponsoring our surveys and packaging research for this year. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And we look forward to hearing the views. We value the opinions and views of those who watch and listen to this webinar. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.